Turning questions into hypotheses. To put it simply, a research question reflects something you are wondering about in the world. A hypothesis is your educated guess regarding the answer to that question. Why is it important to have a hypothesis? This question sounds reasonable for quantitative research that is meant to prove the effect of an intervention. For example, testing if using WhatsApp for teleconsultations of patients with chronic conditions is as effective as face to face consultations. In qualitative research, as we noted in the previous section, things are a little more complex. As presented by Sharon Marin, Elizabeth Tisdale, at their book Qualitative Research, A Guide to Design and Implementation, research designs are based on different assumptions about what is being investigated, and they seek to answer different questions. If, as in the case of qualitative research, understanding is the primary rationale for the investigation, the criteria for trusting the study are going to be different than if discovery out of law or testing a hypothesis is the study's objective. What characterizes a good hypothesis? In their book Designing Clinical Research, Hulley and colleagues state three main principles that must be followed. One, it should be simple, testing preferably the effect of one predictor on a specific outcome. For example, the use of face masks decreases the risk of transmission of coronavirus. Two, it should be specific in order to better define the variables in our study. For example, here's the WHO definition of suspected cases of SARS-CoV-2 infection. The definition is quite extensive and exhaustive. However, if researchers thoroughly describe the suspect case this way, i.e., the use of face masks decreases the incidence of suspect COVID cases as defined by the WHO, their lives will be easier in the future when they need to calculate and compare cases with known cases and etc. Three, it should be stated in advance before conducting the study. This is crucial to avoid interference from the researchers when interpreting the data and the results from the tests. Having a clear hypothesis is crucial for testing it against an alternative hypothesis. In statistics, there is always a null hypothesis that we try to reject by using the most appropriate statistics test.
For example, imagine we designed a strategy to promote access to healthcare to our patients with chronic conditions during the pandemic. Due to restrictions imposed by the pandemic, our clinic designed a strategy to book video consultations for patients with type 2 diabetes, hoping they will be managed as well as they were before the pandemic. Absenteeism to these consultations could be a good parameter for comparison. We have the number of patients with type 2 diabetes booked in the 3 months prior to the pandemic, and the number of patients that missed the consultations. We can again measure the amount of consultations offered in the next 3 months after the intervention and the number of consultations missed in that period. The proportions, consultations missed over consultations booked, will be compared before and after the intervention was implemented. If an increase in the proportion of missed consultations is seen after the intervention, the null hypothesis that the video consultations offered a good access to medical consultations for patients with type 2 diabetes would be rejected, showing that we are not being as effective as we expected to be. Of course, this is just a simplification of the whole process, and we haven't even talked about statistical tests. This is the general idea behind hypothesis testing, and this example aimed to give you an idea about what you need to have in mind when planning to test your hypothesis. It will vary according to the type of comparisons you want to do, since it will determine the type of statistical test you need to perform. If you're planning to perform quantitative research, it is a good idea to contact a statistician and discuss 1. What is your hypothesis? 2. What is the comparison you're planning to perform? And 3. What is the best statistical approach to test the hypothesis? It will save you a lot of time.